Seago. I serve as the legislative director. And I want to briefly discuss with you one piece of legislation that we are prioritizing this session. But first, it's an honor for Texas Right to Life to work with these other groups here in this room, and we're glad to be able to partner with them in this event. So, Texas Right to Life, we're a statewide pro-life organization that seeks to protect innocent human life from fertilization until natural death. And we do this, one way we do this is by having a college scholarship program that promotes pro-life groups on college campuses. So families, as you're here, if you have a student who's in college or a student who's going soon, looking into colleges, and you're looking for scholarship opportunities and pro-life activism, make sure that you talk to one of the Texas Right to Life representatives here, because we have a great scholarship program that helps them start pro-life groups, or if there's a group already on their campus, lead that pro-life group. And it's been an amazing program. We have more than 35 scholars across Texas who are leading their pro-life groups to have pro-life discussions on their campus and be able to spread the message of life. So, got to make a little plug for that, because I know, yeah, it's great. I have to make a plug for that because I know there's a lot of homeschool families in here who are looking at college, and I'm a homeschool grad myself, and I know my parents wanted to hear of every scholarship opportunity possible, so needed to make that plug. Now, another way that Texas Right to Life promotes protecting innocent human life is by spearheading the legislative efforts here in the Capitol. And we're uniquely positioned to actually define what the pro-life agenda is going to be. So in your packet, you'll find a sheet that has Texas Right to Life's logo on it. And on the front of that sheet is our pro-life legislative agenda for this session. And what we've done is we've taken the most likely there will be more than 40 bills related to pro-life issues. And we've taken those and we've limited it down to 5 priorities. And we have determined what the most pressing pro-life needs are in the state of Texas. Now, we didn't do this by consulting a crystal ball. We didn't do this by throwing darts up against the wall. In the interim, as part of our leadership in the pro-life movement, is to host roundtable discussions, to host seminars, meetings around the state with stakeholders, with experts, with lawyers, with doctors, and with our pro-life elected officials. And so that's what we do in the interim. We do research, we do writing, and we host these and bring all of these pro-life leaders to the table and say, what is the biggest need we have right now? And that's how we came up with this list that we give you. So if you would like to know why those are so important on these other issues, we're here to talk. We'd love to talk to you more about that. If you think you would like to be in on those meetings next year, that we start again. If you think you want to be at the table in the roundtable discussions about what the pro-life agenda is, please talk to me. We'd love to include you in that process. Now, so with these lists on the back of that page, so we have the 5 bills listed out. On the back of that page, I give you more details about number 1 on that list, and that is judicial bypass reform, and that's what I was asked to talk about today. This is number 1 on your list, and the problem is that this bill is trying to address is that right now in Texas, a pregnant minor can easily go to a judge instead of her parents to get permission to have an elective abortion. And this process that she goes to the judge instead of her parents needs to be reformed. What we have is whenever for multiple sessions, the legislature has reinstated its intent to have parents involved in that decision. When a pregnant minor is facing an unexpected pregnancy, the Texas legislature and the voters who keep electing these leaders are saying we want parents involved in that decision. That's a hard decision. Nobody's making light of that position. But we need parents involved. Now, as pro-lifers, we're painted as extremists, right? We're painted as radicals, as crazy people who come up with these crazy bills, and you'll see more headlines and more op-eds and more attacks on us whenever this bill gets moving through the process. But let's think about this for a second. This is not that radical, right? In the United States, we have this class of citizens that we call minors for a reason. We've determined that there are young Texans, there are young Americans that deserve and need more legal protection than adults. That's not extremist, that's not radical, right? We've said, and Texas has said, that at a certain age, at a certain young age, there are Texans among us that we need the authority for some of their decisions to be made at the family level, at the parental level, not at the government level, and not up to the minor themselves. Okay, now do I sound like an extremist yet? All right, it's pretty reasonable, right? We do this with education. In Texas, you have a right to homeschool your children. You have a right to determine what school, if they go to a private school or public school. And actually, the legislature, you've heard this morning, is trying to expand the rights that parents have to make these decisions for their children. So they have this choice in education. They have this choice when it comes to personal safety for their children. They have this authority when it comes to other healthcare decisions, right? Well, what we have here is an exception, that parents can be involved unless the minor doesn't want them to be involved. Or, worse, if the abortion clinic doesn't want that minor's parents involved. And just from a practical standpoint, this is what we see, is a minor shows up at an abortion clinic. She tells them their age, and they say, okay, we don't have to, the state law says we should be getting your parents involved in this decision, but there's an exception. And they said, just a second. And they either have their attorney at the abortion clinic, or they call a nonprofit that's specifically built for this process. And they call them up, and within a few minutes, they have an attorney there to take this minor to the courthouse. And this minor is escorted to a courthouse by a pro-abortion attorney to go to a judge and get them permission to seek an abortion without their parents even knowing about it. Now, this law was intended to protect minors, this judicial bypass process. It was put in law to protect abused minors that really were in a terrible situation at home. And this discussion about this unexpected pregnancy would actually put them in more danger and not protect them, right? The state of Texas says getting your parents involved is supposed to be protective, but there are situations, there are broken homes. There are situations where maybe even the pregnant minor, her pregnancy was caused by someone in the home.
That's right.
There are abusive situations.
That's right.
And that's what this judicial bypass process was intended to do, was intended to help a minor in those tough situations. But what's happened is it has become a rubber stamp. It's become full of loopholes. And that pro-abortion attorney, that abortion clinic worker, knows those loopholes, and they're experts at ushering minors through those loopholes.
That's right.
So that's where we step in, and that's where this session steps in. This is extremely important that we look at that judicial bypass process and that we reform it, and that we put in common sense protections. Now, we're not asking for anything extraordinary. We're not asking for something, a right that parents don't already have in other areas. We're not asking for a higher judicial process. Remember, we're so crazy, all we're doing is asking that this court process works like other court processes. It's not that extreme. What we're saying is that when an abortionist takes a minor to a court, they have to go to a court in her county of residency. Because right now, what happens is if you're out in a rural county and it doesn't require the minor to go to a judge in her own county. Other similar petitions have to be in the county of your own residence, right? And are we sounding like extremists yet? Right? You got to go to that. So venue shopping. So these pro-abortion judges, they know exactly which court they want to go to. They know exactly which judge signs these every day. So they can venue shop. They can forum shop. They can go to their particular hand-picked judge to get this stamp of approval. So we clarify the venue. We put in protections so that there's actually a voice in the courtroom for the minor, that the attorney that walks her through the door can't turn around and be her temporary guardian during the court case. Okay? So we have a list of these types of reforms that's going to make this process not extraordinarily hard, going to make it similar to how we handle minors and other similar judicial processes. Okay, and that's called judicial bypass reform. It's going to be carried by Representative Matt Krause, and it's going to be carried by Senator Connie Burton. Senator Connie Burton is the new representative from Fort Worth who's replacing Wendy Davis. So it's a huge effort. absolutely delighted that her predecessor became famous for actually attacking these pieces of legislation that are going to protect the vulnerable, whereas Connie Burton has been working with us in the last few months to stand up and actually defend the helpless, the preborn, as well as these pregnant minors. The last thing I'll mention, just to reiterate how terrible this judicial process is, and I just can't forget it, is that if the attorney, she takes the judge in there, she goes to the hearing, she gives the minor a script to say to the judge, and then they walk out. Well, if they don't hear back from the judge within 2 days, the attorney is supposed to assume the judge granted it to her. It's an automatic granting. And this is just examples of how terrible. And I've got a list of about 30 ways that this law is terrible. If you want the full list, please come tell me. I'll give it to you. So you have an automatic granting if you just don't hear from the judge. And that is unheard of in judicial process. Usually it's the complete opposite. If you don't hear back from the judge, you assume you were denied, right? So this is the radical bill we're trying to pass. This is the radical protections we're trying to put in place to protect minors and their preborn children and restore the family involvement, parental involvement in this important decision of elective abortion. So I want to leave you with that. This is just one piece of legislation out of the 5. You have all 5 of them. If you need more information, feel free to go to our website or catch one of the Texas Right to Life representatives here. We really need to make life a priority. There's already been individuals in the Capitol who are saying, well, this session's not going to be about pro-life stuff. This session is going to be about these other important issues. And that's unacceptable. When we look at these vulnerable pregnant minors, when we look at the preborn who are killed every day, that's not acceptable to us. So we're going to be working here every day this session. We hope that you join us. We thank you for coming, and we look forward to working together in the future. Thanks.